Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Otto's Garage. Hi and welcome back. What we're going to have a look at this time is an installation of a short post, two-post lift from Automotech. I've already started installing the lift, but I'm going to give you a run through of how I got to this stage and give you some top tips so that when you install it yourself, you might save a bit of time. When the lift first arrives, it'll be bolted to a metal cradle system. Just be careful when you unbolt it that you don't just end up dropping the posts on the floor. So you might need a bit of support or an extra pair of hands just to get it all apart. When it's apart, you'll have some main components and you'll need this operation manual just to have a look through so that you can basically determine which parts go where. Obviously, you get the two posts. You've got the master post and the slave post, or the sub-column as they call it, and basically there's a floor plate which connects the two together and predetermines the distance that the posts are set out from. The first thing that you've got to determine, and that is the suitability of the structure that you're going to fix the post to. So in my instance, we've got a concrete slab, and basically it is quite a good floor. It's nice and flat, and it's about 250 mil of concrete deep. You can determine that just by drilling a hole through and just seeing when the concrete runs out, and obviously then you can measure down and just see what kind of depth you've got. But you do need a good bit of concrete in there, and you also don't want to be too near to any slab joint lines. Now I've got one right the way over here, so this is where the slab joins, so well away from the actual post itself. And then you have to make sure that what you're actually building off is decent concrete itself, i.e. the strength of it. It's all going to crumble away and everything like that. And also that you can get the post installed in an upright configuration. The other thing to determine is which side you want your master column to be. I've got mine over on that side of the garage because I've got some shelving units, and the accessibility there is fine for that. I'm not going to be walking past there all the time. However, you do need a bit of room between the column and a adjoining wall or shelves. So I can walk through there anyway, which is fine on that one. So the master post has the hydraulic pump on it and the reservoir down here. You know in the box, or sorry, when you unpack them, that it's the master one because it's got this plate on it ready to accept the pump. The sub post on the other side doesn't have that metal bracket on it. Both sides of that are clear. Another thing as well is on the sub post we've got all of these lovely warning stickers and caution notes for health and safety purposes. So I've determined that my master post is on this side and the sub post is across there on the other side. It's entirely up to you which way around you go with it. What you will do though is have the base plate which goes between them. That's that big long one there. That'll be in two parts, and that needs bolting together, and there are bolts and little brackets on the back side of that. So that's the first thing to do, is get that bolted together. When that is bolted together, you can see you've got two little lugs down there which accept a couple of Allen bolts, and they basically screw into the corresponding holes at the bottom of each post. So what I did was I set the posts up in approximately the right place, and I bolted that cross plate, the base plate between the two, and that exactly determined how far apart they were. You don't need to measure that out. It will only go in one place at that point. The other thing to do is to put a line across the workshop floor from side to side. So we've basically got a line coming all the way across to the other side as well. And then you can use that for setting out your posts and making sure they're parallel to that line. Okay, because I'm a stage ahead here and I've removed the plate at this point, just ignore the cables and the pipe down there for now. But basically when you've got that position of the post in the correct place, the plate fixed to each one down here, at each end as well, and therefore the width apart of the two posts. Once all that is determined, the next thing to do is to mark and drill the holes on the floor where you can actually end up putting those bolts through. The bolts do come with the kit, but it depends on how thick your concrete is and how you're going to fix it down. You may want to resin anchor in. These are through bolts that they supply with the kit, and they need a 19mm hole drilling into the concrete, and then basically knock them down. And then all I did was don't tighten the tops, just knock them in first. Because what you need to do is use some of these little shims, which they supply. They slide in underneath the bolts, and you need to get your posts level, and you've got to have that level in both directions. So making sure that it's not leaning in or out, and then obviously it's not leaning front to back as well. So it's got to be completely plumb, and you achieve that by packing out those bolts off the concrete floor. So I've done that to both sides. I've got the bolts in situ, and I've temporarily torqued them up at the moment, so at least the post isn't waving around, but there is a torque setting in the manual that you need to go to. We'll come back to that later. Once the posts are bolted down, they're not going to fall over, you then need to lift this carriageway up. So this is the where the arms bolt onto. They'll come into here each side. Obviously, as it's sent, they don't have them fixed, so the arms are sent loose and they've got to go on as yet. All you need to do is just lift that up to the first click, and you can see on the rack at the back here, those notches. So they're all the notches that as the post lift is going up, it will click into those. So they're kind of like a secondary safety mechanism. But basically, we just need to lift those up so we've got good access in underneath to the pulley wheels. The pulley wheels are held in situ with a little circlip, and you can just kind of see that on the end there. You'll need some 90-degree nosed circlip pliers, because what you have to do is remove the wheel, because the cable, if you can see underneath, is thicker than the edge of the wheel, so you can't just slide the cable on sideways. You've got to remove that wheel, take it off the end of the spindle, feed the cable through, and then run your wheel back onto it and put the circlip back in position. And that's the easiest way to do those. It doesn't take very long to get those, as long as you've got a decent circlip plier, which will get in there and take the circlips off the end of the spindle. The cables are used to balance each of the lifting hydraulic rams. So basically you want both of these carriers to be going up at the same time on both sides, and the cables make sure that that balancing occurs. They run through the bottom wheel, and then they go all the way up the back cable and up over a top wheel. You have to take the top wheel off again. That's similar to what we said at the bottom, but in this instance there's an R-clip on the side, and you can just pull that out, get a screwdriver and pull it out. The wheel will come off and then feed over the top, and you can kind of see there how tight it is for room between the wheel and the metal plate above it, so that cable can't jump out at any time. So that's quite a safe mechanism as well. The cable then comes down the front and joins, if you look down there by the side of the chain, there's a bolt on the bottom of the cable, which I've just dropped through at the moment, which is this one. So that will basically pull up and it will locate in the carrier and ultimately be bolted to it. Just put it through that hole if it's going to behave itself. There we go. So that goes up into that position there. But what I've done is I've just dropped it down, because I'm just going to tighten up the lock nut on the bottom here. So you've got to have a washer, 2 nuts, and then tighten these 2 together, and that will lock it, because obviously we can't get in there very easily afterwards. So I'll lock those 2 up, pull them up, and then on the corresponding end, we come around back over to here. The cable then, which I've got down there, if you can just see it, it basically will go up through and into this hole, and then I have a locking nut on the top of there. And the good thing with that is I can get at that one and tighten that one up afterwards. So I'll lock the other one off first, pull the cable through, and then we're ready to go. I've locked those 2 nuts on the end of the cable with a 23mm spanner and an adjustable, so they're tight together. I'll remove those and then we can pull it back through and do the same at the other end. Okay, once that cable's up and through, I've got the nut on the top. I've just put one on for now, because what I have to do is then tension that cable, and it's kind of got to be a bit like a guitar string across the floor. So at the moment it's quite slack, and what we'll do is we'll just tighten that up and get a bit of tension into it. Okay, so tightening that up, so you've got your 23mm nut on the top here, but if you use a 15mm, where they've crimped onto the end of the cable down here, there's a hex shape on it, and you can get your 15mm on that. That'll just stop the cable from turning while you're tightening it up, makes it a little bit easier. I've now got that to the stage where on the floor we're now looking at a bit of tension on it. It's not too wild at the moment. Once you've adjusted that correctly, then just get your secondary nut on the top so it locks the two together. Don't forget that. Okay, I've locked that other one off as well. What I would say is that I might need to adjust this later when we're going, but when you're putting these things on, just get them all finally fixed up, locked up tight, because if you don't have to adjust it at a later stage, it's done. You know, there's no messing around. If I leave that nut off and then I fiddle around with everything else, I might just forget that I haven't put the lock nut on it. So I would get all the lock nuts on at this stage, and then if there's any other adjustment, it can just be undone and re-tightened up again afterwards. Right, that's those cables in. Let's have a look at some hydraulic pipes. On the master post, this hydraulic pipe is already pre-fitted to the ram at the bottom, but at the top it basically runs up this channel and then up this other channel here. The top channel is really just for protection during transit, because what you've got to do is pull that pipe down, all the way down, pull it out here between the two so it kind of doubles back on itself, and then poke it through the hole where the grommet is. The same thing applies with the cable off the stop switch on the top there. That's running down the protective channel, and then that just gets fed through, and we'll have a look on the outside as to where that actually comes out. So you've basically got two pipes coming out of the grommet. This cable is going to go to the control box afterwards. The top pipe comes onto your pump and is connected into the side via this 90-degree bend. That elbow is included in the kit as well. There's an O-ring behind here, so all you've got to do is wind that in, tighten it up, get it in the desired position. I've kept mine up out of the way, and then basically that's all ready to go on that front. When the pump arrives in the box, and it is in a separate box, the reservoir underneath this control handle and the pump, they're all connected and fitted up as one package. All you need to do is lift it up onto the post and then connect it up with the bolts. Again, they're supplied in the kit. So basically that's all straightforward. This is a test wire up here that is going to be removed, so don't worry too much about that at the moment. We will have our proper wire coming from the control unit into here afterwards. We'll look at that later. On the floor, you can see our long hydraulic hose, which basically again comes in the kit. So that is going to run between the two posts right the way from bottom to bottom. And it basically is just, you just connect it up onto the bottom of the ram via the nut. I found that this line was slightly long, and I was a bit concerned because you don't want to have that touching the cables. These cables are obviously going to move, and I didn't want them to be rubbing on it, but when I tightened them up, it kind of put a little bit of a corkscrew effect into it as it tightened, and that meant basically that it keeps the pipe in the middle and away from those cables, which is what we want. I think I might even, when I'm done, put a couple of clips and screw them down to the floor so that it can't move sideways, because I don't want it to be kind of like doing this where it touches it. So a couple of clips on the floor might not be a bad idea as well. Going back one stage, so before the cables were fitted, these top plates are supplied loose. They don't come factory fitted onto the actual posts themselves, and they're just attached by means of some Allen bolts each side. And then basically you have to have that in place before you can get the cable obviously over this wheel. Everything is hung off the top plate at that position. The limiting switch in the back there the height limiting switch, that is already supplied, fitted to the post, but it will need some adjustment, I'm sure, when we actually come to run the post for the first time. In the manual, it does lay out exactly how all those various parts go together, but it does miss a little bit of detail because really it's designed for an engineer to fit it rather than a home fitting solution. But in any event, it's fairly comprehensive. But what I would say is that they are saying about anchoring the posts kind of at the end when you've put everything together. I found it better to get the position of the posts in the right place and then basically get them fixed down to the floor nice and level before I started attaching all the cables and the hoses, etc. The next stage is going to be fitting the electronic control box. Now that is supplied again in the kit. Everything's all pre-wired in there. You don't have to worry about that. It's the other end that's going to connect to stuff. So you've basically got a cable here with some little fixings, connectors on the end of it that we can go through with. But you haven't got to mess around with anything in there. The only thing that I've done is disconnect this connection which runs to the control front panel, just so that we've got better access, because what I've got to do is fix with these kind of little machine screws here. These are going to go through the case and bolt that unit onto the side of the post. Where the electronic control box connects to, the post has already got holes which are not only drilled but also threaded. So basically those machine screws are just going to thread straight into the back of those, and then you haven't got to mess around with trying to get a knot on the inside. Top tip for you, get one of these magnetic trays. You can keep all of your little screws and bolts in there ready to go, much easier than fiddling around with them. So I've got that first one in. All I need to do now is get this second one in over here. We'll just keep them a little bit loose so we can make sure the bottom ones align, and then basically that's the control panel in place. Right, there's the electrical control unit, and that's on the side. It's got this big lead coming out the top with our terminals that we looked at before. They have got to go up into the hydraulic control power unit, which is this little beast up here. I've already taken these screws out of the side, and that panel just pops off. And then inside you can see where the test leads go. So you've got a brown at the top one here. I've already taken that one off anyway. There's a blue in for the neutral behind, and then there's the earth at the top there. So I'll strip those ones out, reconnect our other lead into it, and then we'll have a look where we are. Okay, just bear in mind as well that the lead that comes from the control box down here has got a blue and a black in it. The blue's neutral and the black is live, so just bear that in mind, because on the test lead you had a brown and a blue. So basically don't be fooled by thinking that black is the earth. That is the live. Obviously the earth's connected back up there, but what I would refer you to is the chart. Hold on, let's just have a look in the back here, the control box diagram, which basically has given you the colours of the live and the neutral in there. So refer back to that and that will tell you exactly where you are. This grey lead here is the one that comes from that limiting height switch on the top of the post. It's got an A on it, it comes down, and basically it goes into this little golden coloured block here. I found, take that block out, so undo that middle screw, remove it from the backing board. It's a bit easier to do all the connections on it and then screw it back on again afterwards. If we go further down the control box, you've got this triple bus bar here, and that is labelled up underneath with neutral, going from the left, neutral, live, and then the protected multiple earth on the right. So that is where our main feed is coming in through this little chap here, and that will get it connected into the bottom there of that bus bar. The next stage is to fit the arms onto the carrier. So that's basically an arm on each one side of here. The arms come in 4 packages. This is a pair of them. So what we'll do is we'll get those opened up and see what they look like. These are the arms. That's the front arm, and over here we have got the rear arm. Now the rear arm is longer than the front arm, so you know straight away that there is a difference there. But the other thing that I would say is that when the car is approaching the lift,
So this is the correct way around. The car's coming in this way now. The long arm goes at the rear, so basically it goes towards the back of the car, and then the front arm goes towards the front of the car. So short at the front, long at the back. They're located on these quite hefty pins, which have got a groove in one end of them, and that groove is there to accept our good friends the circlip. So basically the other thing to bear in mind is that you've got a toothed semicircular wheel that locks the angle of the arm when it's under the car, and that goes into a corresponding grooved crescent shape locator, basically, which is on the bottom of those knobs. So the knobs, all of that is factory fitted, that comes as it is. It's just the arms we need to get in. So you've got to have the arm the correct way up, obviously with the groove wheel, the knurled wheel down at the bottom there, and then the pin goes through, down, and the circlip goes underneath. But I'll get that on and you can have a look at it and see how it all fits. That's the front arm in position. I haven't put the pin all the way down yet. I'm going to get a little bit of grease on there, and the same at the bottom. But you can see how I've lifted up the knob on this side, and that's just let me engage the holes, get them in the right place. This has got a slope on it, so the gear is not straight cut, or it is straight cut, but it's got a taper. So you have to just kind of lift this knob up to get this to go back far enough, and then it'll just all lines perfectly. So I'll get a bit of grease on that, and then we'll get the circlip put in place. These are the circlip pliers that we used before, so you've got that 90-degree bend on them, and then basically it's just a matter of getting that circlip fitted back up on the underside of the pin. Quite straightforward. That's the arms on the other side, so that's on the master post. What I'm going to do now is just take off this packaging here, and then you can see how the ram interacts with the lift chain. So that's the lift chain, and you can see the hydraulic ram that basically pushes it up. So that is lifting up and down the arms when the hydraulic fluid is in situ. The next job really is to get the hydraulic fluid filled up, and then we can have a look at the master electrical connection and just see if we can get the whole thing going. You may notice at the moment that I haven't fitted the blue guard which goes between the posts, and that's really so that I can double check when the fluid's in that I'm not getting any leaks at the bottom of these hoses on each side. So I've got some 32 amp flex here which is connected into the bottom terminal block which we looked at earlier. I will be getting my electrician to run the cable correctly, but at the moment that will do just for getting the testing on it. So obviously the cable's going to be eventually fixed up into the roof and then run down to the main fuse box over in the corner of the workshop. Well, it's all starting to come together now. The next job on the list is filling with hydraulic oil. So the oil that you need is a 32 grade hydraulic oil. I'm going with this Fuchs kit, but other brands are available. It needs about 7 to 8 litres. We've got 5 litres in each of those. I've got 2 boxes of that, and then basically that needs to go into this reservoir here, and here indeed is the filling hole. So basically I need a funnel in there, and then I can put some in, get that filled up. Then I'll have to run the pump, and it will pull some of that oil down through the rams across to the other ram on the other side, and then you basically raise and lower it just to kind of bleed the air out and get all of the hydraulic oil into the right place. So I'll get that filled up, and then we'll see where we are. Here's a top tip for you. You're going to need a funnel because this hole's quite small. What I've got is this little funnel going up here, and all I've done is I've just cable tied it back up to the top of this junction on the control box, so that basically I can fill it up in the top there, and then I'm going to keep holding the funnel while I'm filling it. But what I would recommend is, even if you're using a normal tin, you know, like a 5 litre tin of that rather than this cardboard box effort that we've got, decant it into a little jug first, and then all you need to do is get up there and tip that into the top of that funnel. But you do need to have something stable to stand on. And especially if you've got a taller lift, this is obviously a short post lift. If you've got a taller one, you need to be right up there on a pair of steps probably to do that. Okay, let's crack on. Right, I've got that filled up to about this point. I think it's probably got about 6 litres in at the moment. The cap where the funnel is, in here, that cap comes off and that's got a dipstick on it, and you can see it's got 3 marks on there. And I'm making a wild stab at low, medium and full. So we'll go with that. But in any event, I'm not going to have that in at the moment because I'm probably going to have to add more hydraulic oil into the funnel in a bit. So what I'm going to do now is come around to this side of it, and we've got a master control switch here. So I've put all the panel back on again, and we are powered up temporarily at the moment. There's a master control switch here. If we flick that on, and we get ourselves a green light. On the other side here, we've got an up switch, so I'm going to press that and we'll see what occurs. So it's, you can see, I'm just going to zoom in on the other side here. So as she's on the up switch again, starting to fill that fluid and indeed take the tension into the chain. So just a quick look around on the inside, and we can see that the ram is in its correct position, and that is under tension now. That's not moving anywhere, so that's good. I can't see anything down the bottom here with regard to leaks currently. I'm going to have a look on the other side, and that is all looking good as well. And again, that ram there is under tension. So what we're going to do now is just see whether we can get some height into these arms. And we're going up again. Okay, so that clicking noise that you can hear, the quite violent one, that's just where the safety is going onto those toothed areas at the back. So as it raises, it does that and clicks in so that it can't then fall back down. Right, and what we've also encountered is the automatic stop switch at the top. So that has basically gone up to the top. I'm going to see if we can get a bit of light in there and just have a quick look. So that's hit the top of that and it's cut out, which is what we wanted it to do. So that's good news. So what we need to do now is see whether it is going to come back down again. Okay, and the other thing that we can see here is that the fluid level has dropped considerably down, but that is obviously because the ram was basically filled up with fluid at that point. So we're going to ease this down now, and you can do that by pressing on this one. However, what will happen now is it won't go anywhere when I press this button. There, so she stopped. So that has basically landed on the automatic safety ratchet. So we've got to raise it up clear of the ratchet, and then the little red loop there, that's going to have to be pulled to disengage, and then it should drop back down again afterwards. So the auto stop switch in there, that needs adjusting, because what happened there was that it's not freeing off, so it won't let me pump it back up and lift it over the safety catch. But I've just had a bit of a play with that. Disconnected the two red tags, pull those back. Let's come back around and see whether we can get it to drop with our handle. So that's releasing the fluid. And you can see that is actually coming down, which is good news. It's obviously taking its time at the moment because there's no weight on it. When the car's on it, it will go down a little bit quicker than that. Okay, that's great. The other thing is the cables on the bottom there are working perfectly, and they're keeping both sides of the lift in balance, which is perfect. The other thing that I did notice was that when it was going up, the safety click was exactly the same on both sides. It wasn't like one was clicking and the other wasn't. So everything's working perfectly on the balance cables as well. So that's good news. Going back to the hydraulic fluid level, you can see that's back up to here now. So what we need to do is just put the dipstick in the top with that cap on it, and then we'll just have a double check and put a little bit more fluid in it. But I don't think it's a million miles off, to be honest. It might just need another litre in there. Revisiting the hose that was on the floor, and I did the right thing leaving the cover plate off, because I did develop a slight leak where it goes onto that union at the bottom of the sub post. That one is. Looking at it, I've traced it back to a faulty fitting on the end of the flexi hose just there, which meant that it just wouldn't align in the right position. However, I've been on to Automotech, and fantastic service there for after sales, immediately dispatching one, so I should have that tomorrow, which means we can then get it up and running again. So thank you very much, Andy, for that. That's outstanding after sales service. Cheers. While I'm waiting for that hose, I thought it'd be a good idea to get these little handles on, so they just help when you're moving the arm in and out near the car. However, of course, what I did notice was that I've fitted this arm the wrong way round, and obviously the corresponding rear arm on the other side. And you know that because these two bolts here are the ones which actually mount the arm, and obviously the handle, that needs to be on the outside, not on the inside. So I'm going to swap these two over left to right, and then that should sort that out, and we can put those handles on. That's the clips that I've just fitted to stop the hydraulic line from getting into contact with the balance tensioner cables. So quite simple. They're not tight clips. They are actually 22mm plumbing fittings, but it does mean that there's a little bit of play in the pipe as well. So nothing's under tension. It just keeps them in the right place. The next job is to refit this central cover over the cables and that pipe. So I'll get that on. So that's just got the two little machine-headed Allen screws going in there. And again, just put those in loosely, get up the other end, align that one, and then you can tighten everything up afterwards. That's the bolt that we're looking at. Little Allen-headed, quite short, stumpy, and that's just dropping down into there, and you can see where those are aligning nicely. Easiest thing to do with those is just drop them down the hole and then put the Allen key on it, give her a twist, in she goes. Simples. At the bottom of the post you've got another two holes here, and this is basically for this little bracket that is going to fit just over there like that, and the purpose of that is so that you can fit a curtain literally up the front of your ram basically, and that is this little puppy here. So basically it is just a bit of fabric. It's got a metal plate in one end of it with some eyelets that goes down onto that bottom one, so that's going to fit over there like that, and then it runs up, goes behind the carriage, and then it's going to be hung in those holes at the top. So there's two long bolts that come down there and hang the curtain at the top. So I am going to have to drop the carriage down just a little bit so we can get at that. But what I'll do is I'll bolt the bracket on the bottom first onto the curtain, and then that'll hang it down, and we'll put these two screws into the base plate last. Now the thing that's different with these machine screws here is that these have got a PH2, so it's looks like a Phillips number 2 point on it, but basically other than that, that's standard thread, and both the brackets and the bottom of the post are threaded ready to accept those, so that's dead easy. With the carriage lowered, if you have a look on the inside, you can see there's a little slot basically, and that slot is where our curtain has got to go. So don't put the bottom bracket on first. This weighted bit is going to drop down behind the carriage, and then I can drop that right the way down to the bottom.
with that weight on it, that goes in there quite simply. So we've dropped that down through the slot, and presto, there it is out the bottom. So that just needs to drop down a little bit more, and then we can fix it to the bottom bracket. The top curtain bracket is suspended using the longer hex, which has a number 5 key to go in the end of there, and that just basically just drops down through, and this is threaded again, so that just goes into there and suspends it. And there it is, fully fitted. So that is a nice finishing touch, and just helps keep a bit of dirt and dust away from the internal workings. Well, that's most of the lift fitted, but if you remember a bit ago, when we fitted the studs into the concrete floor, I said we were going to come back and have a look at the torque settings before we put any major load on there. Have a look in the manual and we'll just see what exactly that needs to be. Basically, down here on page 13, we've got the column plumb, blah, 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 and the anchor bolts need to be 203 Newton meters. And it's quite concise about, you know, how to fit those there. So that's all good information. But 203 newtons is what we're going to, so we have to get a torque wrench out for that and then tighten them up in the floor. The last items that you get are basically the chassis pads. So these basically go into the arm, and you can adjust the height of those up and down. And this piece here, this riser piece, is also in a couple of different lengths. So depending on the vehicle that you're lifting, you can raise or lower this to get up to the chassis. All that remains now is to get the car on it, give it a lift. I've raised it and lowered it a few times. Hopefully that's got some air out of the system. So I'll just see if I can get some weight of the car on it. I just lift it off the ground a little bit and just double check them for any leaks, anything like that. So that's the next stage. When you come to extend these arms, which do slide out quite easily, there's a little tag inside welded on the side of this, and the bolts which hold the handles or the guards, they also act as a safety, so you can't pull the arm out too far. But what you've got to watch is that, as I did, when I fitted the handle, the arm was so far back that the tag was on the other side of this bolt, so the tag was back here, which meant that when I tried to pull it out, it just wouldn't come out at all. So just be aware of that when you put the handle on, that the arm can extend and retract between those bolts. If it does get stuck, obviously just ease the bolt off, pull the arm out a bit, and then tighten it back up again. Well, that's the car lifted up and it is all working nicely. What you've just got to make sure is that your jacking points are obviously in the right place. And it's not an issue on this car because there's plenty of strengtheners put into it, but obviously have a look on your manufacturer's jacking points on your vehicle and happy days, you will have a nice, easy to work on workspace. Obviously with the short towel lift, which is what we've got here, the short post one, I'll probably have to have a chair which is going to, can sit on it and work on it. You can't stand full height up there. That's lifting it to about 1.4, 1.5 meters. And there you go. Happy days. Enjoy your two-post lift from Automotech.
Bye bye.